Hello and welcome to episode 232 of the Boys in the Booth podcast. Myself, Chad Melbourne, joined by Casey Abrams. No Harper Cody for this episode. He's feeling a bit under the weather. We were also extending the invite to a couple of our buddies who were on the Four Nations face-off trip with us to Montreal. But wow, the internet out in North Augusta and surrounding areas is clearly not very good. So that didn't work out. But yeah, Case, we're going to talk about the Four Nations face-off weekend. Before we get into it, just give me your top level, your experience at the Four Nations, and then we'll get into talking about the actual final game, and then our experience, like watching Team Sweden, Team Finland, and going to the bar and watching Team Canada play Team USA.
Well, first, just like a complete overview on the tournament before I talk about when we were there.
Yes.
Like, remember our episode last year where we did how to fix the NHL All-Star break?
Yeah.
Well, here's how you fix it. You shoot it to the moon and have a Four Nations face-off or anything like this with best on best where they actually care. Like, how
100%.
much it meant to the players, how much this tournament meant to the fans, how much it drove attention to the league. Everyone was talking about it. Like, I would be on a work call with someone who is not a hockey fan at all, and they're talking about the score of the game and like the fights and everything that happened in this tournament. It was just so good for the game of hockey, and I'm excited to see, if it drives viewership up. I feel like there's a lot of pressure on the teams to kind of play their best hockey right now. Like, you're playing playoff hockey because the league is just begging for it. But to switch to our game and what we went to, like going to that.
Hold on. Let me just add on top of that. Like, you're talking about how good this is for the game and everything. Like, the numbers were incredible. Like, they were released both in the US and Canada. The actual numbers, people who watched this thing were just out of this world. And you mentioned, like in a work call, having this brought up, like I was getting texts out of the woodwork like crazy from people I don't even talk to saying, like, specifically, did you see those 3 fights in 9 seconds? Like, what's happening? Explain this to me. Like, explain it to me like I'm 5, because like, there were so many eyeballs on this thing, which is insane, because the NBA All-Star Weekend was also happening, which was a total flop, by the way. The NHL All-Star last year was in Toronto, the hockey mecca of the world, and the viewership was nowhere close. And people don't care about the All-Star game anymore, like, and especially the skills competition. Like, remember last year, that this was just like the pinnacle last year when Nikita Kucherov is like floating around the zone, like chucking passes at the skills comp. Like, no one cares about it anymore. Maybe it's because there's not a financial incentive. Maybe it's just because it's boring. Like, there's nothing, it's not entertaining. But when you put on those jerseys and represent your country, even if it is a made up tournament, like going into it, people were arguing that it was a bit ticky tacky and it's made up, and who knows what the actual feeling will be when they're in that game. No. We've seen it now. It's been done. When you put on that jersey, no matter what tournament you're playing in, the players care, and that makes everyone else care as well.
Just listening to some of the guys who were not at the tournament, like the first one that comes to mind is Tage Thompson. Yeah, it sounded like there was pain in his voice when he's talking about not being there for that tournament. He wanted to be there so bad, and there's a lot of guys like that. And I mentioned to you, I felt like Quinn Hughes was kicking himself for not going, but it turned out to be he wasn't medically cleared in the end. But I could just imagine that a few of the guys who opted out of this tournament, like a Pietrangelo maybe, probably kicking himself right now.
That's the first guy who comes to my mind, because, for Petro, yeah, sure, he's already done it, right? Like, he's played on Team Canada, like, he's won Stanley Cups, like, he's had an incredible career at this point, and he's one of the few in the league who has actually played for his country, whereas a lot of these younger guys have not. So that's why it was so appealing to them. But, especially a guy like Connor McDavid and that whole generation, because we haven't had best on best in forever, like since 2014 at the Olympics. So you kind of get it from Petro, taking a step back and being like, you know what, like, I'm going through something right now. Like, let me just see what I can do. And by the way, still playing like 25 minutes a night for Vegas after he said he had an ailment and couldn't play in the tournament. Do you not think that guy's kicking himself? Like, when he saw how, like, real and legit this tournament was. Like a Drew Doughty, for example, that's another guy on the opposite end of the spectrum, had gone through all of this before. Like, again, one of those older guys who's actually played for his country and experienced it and also won cups. And he was like chomping at the bit to be at this tournament. Like he was, frothing at the mouth. He wanted to be there so bad. And when he won, and I saw this the other day, when he won, he was texting with the empty netters guys. And the one thing he said was, man, winning feels so freaking good. Like that was the first thing he said. And he's a grizzled vet who's won at every level, like it's crazy to me. So I think, yeah, you're right. Like a guy like Petro's got to be kicking himself for not going.
Yeah. And to kind of point out the comparisons between the NBA All-Star game and this, like all those memes where it's like when Wemby's going around and just kind of cheating at the skills competition and got disqualified in the end, but
yeah,
just like showing that, and they're like throwing balls at nets and just not really caring what's happening, and then it cuts to the 3 fights, McDavid goal, like all of that.
Yeah,
it's so great, and it's kind of an optimal thing for the league, having this like huge gap in product that they just put on the screen for everyone. And then PK Subban is just banging the NHL's drum right now and driving a lot of attention. I looked in the comment section of a NBA page that posts some of the PK Subban stuff, and it's like, I don't know anything about hockey, but I might be tuning in now because they were just ready to run through a brick wall listening to him. But
yeah, he had that one good rant on, I don't know if it was on TNT or he was on a different show, but yeah, I heard that one big rant of his where it's like, what are we doing at the NBA All-Star? No one cares. Look at the NHL. Look at what they're doing. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
We interrupt this podcast to tell you about one of our favorite partners, Sign Up Expert. If you're a sports bettor, whether a brand new one, casual, or hardcore, listen very carefully because this ad is for you. Guys, line shopping for the best odds matters, and that's why any profitable sports bettor needs to be using multiple sports books to maximize their winnings. Thankfully, there has never been a better time to get signed up, and we are here to connect you with the best promotions industry-wide. When you use our link at signupexpert.com/boysinthebooth, you can get access to all the top sportsbooks in your region, along with a review of each platform and their benefits. Most importantly, all of these sportsbooks have valuable sign-up offers for new users, and when you register through our link, again, signupexpert.com/boysinthebooth, you will automatically receive the top offer at each one, allowing you to start line shopping with an enhanced bankroll. Guys, once again, it's simple. When you use multiple sportsbooks, you ensure that you can always access the best available odds out there, which is key to being successful and taking home those winnings, baby. So, if you want to take advantage of these incredible benefits and support our brand all at the same time, it's a win-win. Please consider signing up for your next sportsbook through our link in the description down below. signupexpert.com/boysinthebooth. One more time, that's signupexpert.com/boysinthebooth. Hey guys, Harp here from the pod. We all want two things as sports fans when it comes to buying tickets: to not be ripped off by scalpers and to have an easy way to do it. That's where SeatGeek comes in. This pod is sponsored by the absolute best ticket app out there, SeatGeek. SeatGeek takes the confusion out of buying tickets, making it quick and easy to get the best deals on tickets to your favorite sporting events. It does this awesome thing where they score each ticket out of 10 based on its value, so you know whether you're getting a good deal or not. If the tickets are green, you'd better act quick and secure those things, but if the tickets are red, maybe wait a little bit before pulling the trigger and monitor the price in the SeatGeek app. SeatGeek just makes it way too easy. Anyways, here's the best part. SeatGeek has completely hooked us up. Boys in the Booth listeners get $20 off their first purchase on SeatGeek with the promo code Boys in the Booth in all caps. Click the link in the description to download the app today. And remember to get your discounted tickets to your favorite sporting events using the code BOYSINTHEBOOTH in all caps. Get great seats for a fraction of the cost with SeatGeek. Now back to your regularly scheduled podcast.
Okay, I should share something here. This is something that I've been needing to tell you, man, and like everybody else too. Like I haven't really told anyone like the entire story, but like I got to tell you about our time getting out of Montreal, and then we'll go into talking about our time in Montreal last weekend at the Four Nations Face-Off. This was supposed to be the quickest, easiest trip of my entire life, right? Fly into Montreal on the Saturday morning, go see Sweden and Finland play in the afternoon, go to a bar to see Canada USA play that evening at 8 o'clock, get a few Z's and fly out of there the next morning at 11:45, be back in Toronto by around 1 p.m. That was the plan. That did not happen. Okay. Worst experience of my entire life with Porter Airlines. And I have to share this because I know our buddy John is going to be listening to this and he needed me to get this out there because we got absolutely screwed around with all day and it was the worst experience ever. So we get on the 11:45 flight, we get to the airport. And by the way, it's a crazy snowstorm. All the Air Canada flights and basically every other airline had canceled their flights the night before. John and I, right before we go to bed at like 1 a.m. or whatever, on the Saturday, we check, our flight is still good, set to take off at 11:45. So we go to the airport. We're looking at the board. Only our Porter flight is set to take off, but all the other flights are canceled. So we're like, maybe it's a sign. Maybe this is a good thing, right? Like maybe we just got lucky and for whatever reason, they think they're going to be able to take off. So we're there at 9:30 or whatever, a little bit early for, a quick, short domestic flight. But so we're there at 9:30. We get on the plane. We're on the tarmac. The jets are fired up, right? Like ready to go.
I didn't know you got on the plane.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, dude. We're actually taxiing towards the runway to take off. They've done the entire safety demonstration, right? And then we sit there and we're on the plane for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, no communication, right? Finally, after sitting on the plane for about 45 minutes, there's an announcement. The captain goes, "Sorry, folks, we're going to have to deplane. We're not taking off. The snowstorm is too bad." Which, you know what? Fair enough. When you looked outside at the time, it was pretty bad. You couldn't really see. But could they not have canceled, the night before, like every other major airline that's a legit company, So we're like, okay, whatever. This is what it is. We'll wait for it to blow over. We'll get on the next one. So we rush, John and I literally run across the airport to be first in line at the Porter desk to be rescheduled for the next flight out of town to Toronto. Because again, this is the long weekend. The family day is the Monday. And we wanted to spend time with our girlfriends on the Monday, right? That was the whole plan. So we get on we're scheduled to be on the 6:40 flight. That's the next one out of town. And we think, okay, by 6:40, it's going to be cleaned up. It's going to be good to go. Well, we have some time to kill before the 6:40 flight. And from the night before that I was wearing a pair of Blundstones that absolutely blew up. For whatever reason, my left boot just got completely destroyed and it didn't have a heel. So I'm walking, lopsided like this. My left boot is soaked because it's a snowstorm. I'm trying to get around. It's not a good thing. So I'm like, you know what, John, if we've got some time, let's go to the Eaton Center in Montreal and I'll buy a pair of boots because we've got the time. I need it. Whatever. I need a new pair anyway. Might as well buy them while we're here. Uber there is $75. Same on the way back to the airport, by the way, because again, it's a snowstorm and the city completely shut down and didn't know how to deal with it. I don't know whose fault it is. I don't know if it's anybody's fault. It's just the city wasn't prepared for the amount of snow that they got. So it was an absolute
Montreal
nightmare.
Is pretty good at snow removal, but this was a huge snowstorm and
it was crazy.
It really did shut down the city.
It was crazy. And I actually saw something yesterday that said something like the city of Montreal is going to spend close to $50 million to remove all the snow. And they think they can do it by early March. And all the comments are like, just let it melt for 50 million. Like, and by the way, like, where's that? Like, who came up with that number? That's insane. But anyway, so we go to the Eaton Center in downtown Montreal, right? And we've got to get lunch. So we're spending money on that too. That was like, and we got a couple drinks too, because we might as well make the most of it. So, we're spending like 50, 60 bucks on lunch. And then I'm like, okay, let's go get me some boots here, because that's priority number one. I'm walking all lopsided. My heel is literally through my boot on the floor. Like it's no good. We go to probably 8, maybe even 10 different stores, just looking for a generic, like, Doc Marten slip-on boot, right? You see them in every single store. And I'm like, and I need a size 11. We went to all those stores. Not a single one had a size 11. One girl tells me at the shop, she goes, we have a 7 or a 13. Would either of those work? And I'm like, no, I need an 11. We had another guy at a different store look it up, and he said, yeah, there's not a single size 11 in any Doc Marten boots in all of Montreal. So we're like, what is going on here? So
small feet in Montreal.
Yeah, like, so, size 11, pretty common size. I feel like anything between like a 9 and a 12 is pretty damn common. But anyway, so I'm walking around on this lopsided boot still. Like, we're both miserable at this point. And we've spent a bunch of money on lunch and Ubers and whatever. Can't buy any boots. Anyways, it was just total disaster. We get back to the airport for our 6:40 flight. We get there maybe like 5 o'clock or so. And we're about to board the plane at like 6:30. Finally. And by the way, like, this whole time ongoing, we're expecting to get on the flight because it hadn't been canceled or delayed or anything. So we're fully expecting to get on the flight. So about 6:30, like 10, 15 minutes before we're supposed to take off, they finally delay the flight and move it to now 8:10. I think it was scheduled to leave. And there's 2 now. So there's 2 flights supposed to leave in and around like 8:15, 8:30 or something. And so whatever, we get on one of those flights. It turns out to be the second of the 2 that they're offering. So we're stuck at the airport. The only bright side about being stuck at the airport here is we got to meet a few people. We got to meet a few content creators from Toronto, which was pretty cool. Austin Alexander is one. He does the whole coaches thing, like the fake coaches who interview the players. And so that was pretty cool. And the other guy is Tom Stewart, I believe is his name. And he works for Sportsnet too. He also does like the on the street interviews and whatnot. So we got to chat, hang out with those guys for, a little bit, just to share in the terrible situation that everyone was in.
Commiserate a little bit.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So we end up getting ready for our 8:30 flight. Remember, there's one at 8:15 going to Toronto, another one at 8:30. They both get delayed, of course. And by the way, when you look outside at this point, like, it's not a snowstorm. Like, it's fine, right? So like, we know that these planes are going to take off and go to Toronto. But anyway, they get delayed. I think they had to move a bunch of things around, like on the tarmac and whatnot, because there was just a lot going on and whatever. So that's fine. But they're going to take off, right? Because it doesn't look crazy outside. Well, the first one gets delayed to 9:30. Our flight ended up, it was supposed to be taking off at 9:36. So they actually take off at 9:30, the first of the 2 flights going to Toronto. And they're fine. And everything went swimmingly from there on out for that first plane. The second plane, then, because the first one, after several delays, actually took off, ours was delayed another 15, 20 minutes or whatever. So eventually it was scheduled to leave at 9:50. And the flight from Montreal to Toronto was about an hour and 20 minutes, something to that effect. Our flight, about 15 minutes before we were supposed to take off at 9:50, is canceled. And everyone is in shock because we just saw, like 10 minutes before, the other flight to Toronto by Porter Airlines take off and land in Toronto. So we're like, what could possibly have happened in the last 10 or 15 minutes that our flight is canceled and theirs was not? They cited weather issues as to why ours was canceled, and everyone was pissed, right? Because it doesn't make any sense. Turns out, from a quick Google search, we found out that Billy Bishop has a curfew where planes cannot land after 11 p.m. It was a curfew issue. That's why. And because our flight was delayed, and we happened to be the second one going to Toronto, we weren't able to take off that night. Canceled entirely. So again, John and I, we need to get out of this city. At this point, like, we are hating our lives, right? Like, we've been in an airport all day. I've got one boot that works. Like, we're hungover, we're tired. Like, we just want to go home for family day. We sprint to the Porter desk, try to get on the next flight. They say, next one available is on Wednesday. This is Sunday. We're like, what do you mean the next one available is on Wednesday? So, and that's what they're telling everyone. So the first thing we do is we sprint downstairs at the airport to go and rent a car, right? We go and rent a car. We fill out all the paperwork. Actually, I guess that wasn't the very first thing we did. The first thing we did was check trains. No trains running on Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday, going from Montreal to Toronto. Then we checked buses. No buses running from Montreal to Toronto on Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday. So we're like, what is going on here? So we go to the basement and try to rent a car. And they're like, yeah, like we have one left. And by the way, at this point, like, by the time we get down to the car rental place, it's got to be like 10:45, right? Maybe 11 o'clock p.m. because we've been, dealing with trying to get our flight rescheduled and going through all these different avenues to try to get home, right? They're like, yeah, we have one car left. It doesn't have snow tires. And by the way, it's a blizzard, to remind you. Like, it's not as bad as it was, but like, there's still a ton of snow on the ground.
I feel like that should be illegal to give you that car.
Exactly. So John and I were like, okay, let's think about it. If we leave now, the regular drive to Toronto from Montreal would be like 6.5 hours or something. But because of the snow, it'll probably take like 8 hours. It's 11. That means we're not getting to our homes until like 7 a.m. after driving all night and being up all day, pissed off, tired, hungover at an airport, like just wasting away. And so we fill out all the paperwork. Like, we haven't paid yet, but we filled out all the paperwork and we're like, okay, does this really make sense? Like, to drive all the way. So we're like, we finally are like, no, it probably doesn't. We end up getting a hotel and we booked the last room at the hotel closest to the airport. It's about a 4-minute drive. So we're like, return the piece of paper that they gave us that we filled out for the car, gave it back. We're like, whatever, we won't take the car without snow tires, death trap in Montreal. Like, we don't need it, whatever. We'll take an Uber, we'll go back to the hotel, and then we'll fly out in the morning, because we got a text, and that's why we ended up making the decision as well. We got a text saying that, like, no, actually someone dropped out of the flight that's supposed to leave tomorrow, and you have been bumped up. We both got that text, which was incredible. So like, we're flying out on the Monday. I guess that was an important detail. That's why we canceled the car. But so we end up waiting another like hour and a half trying to find an Uber, because the city is total chaos. There's so many canceled flights and everything. Like, there's a million people at the airport. You can't get out of there. It's like an hour wait just to get a taxi. There's like shuttle buses and everything, but they're useless. So we finally get an Uber after waiting for like an hour and 30 minutes to go to our hotel, which is like a 4-minute drive. It's like a $60 Uber, like just getting rinsed like at every single turn. Anyway, we sleep. Before we did all this, by the way, like, so this is like probably midnight and we're in the airport still, like, waiting. We got a bottle of wine and some snacks. And so we took that back to the airport, or back to the hotel rather. So we made a bit of a night of it, like the two of us. And then in the morning we drive to the airport again, another Uber, another like $30 Uber or something, fly out at 11:45. It gets delayed by like an hour, but we didn't care. Like, we had to miss the first period of the Canada-Finland game, which happened on the Monday. But at that point, like, when we landed in Toronto, like, we just wanted to kiss the ground, because it was just such a terrible experience. Like, we were still in our same clothes from the night before because we packed to be in Montreal for like 26 hours, not 2 entire days. We're in our same clothes. I've got one boot on. Like, we're out a ton of money. Like, we've just sat in an airport for so long, and then on top of it all, we had to miss the first period of the Canada-Finland game, which, like, thankfully it didn't matter because they went up early in that game. So, like, it wasn't a big deal, but man, like, just an absolute brutal experience. And I just had to share that. Porter absolutely messed around with us for like 24 hours, and we were at their mercy. We couldn't do anything about it. We just had to sit there and accept our fate and hope that we could get home at some point before the Wednesday, which is when we were told we were going to be home, which is just insane. So that's my story, Case. What are your thoughts?
That was rough. You were keeping us updated, and I felt bad because we were kind of going through it a little bit with our drive home. The drive home from Montreal is usually like 3 hours to Kingston, and it took us 5.5, which we thought that was bad because we're driving like 65 kilometers an hour on the 401 until like maybe I don't know, Prescott or Iroquois. We probably cranked her up to like maybe 80 kilometers an hour. So it was bad, and you have transports flying by it going 110 when everyone else is going 60, and it's just like an absolute death trap. Chunk was a hero driving all the way. I was in and out of consciousness the whole time in the front seat sleeping, so couldn't complain too much. But I have your location, and I just kept opening it up and looking, and I go, still in Montreal. I did that for probably 20 hours. I just kept opening my phone going, he's still in Montreal.
Boy, that sucks.
I'm like comfortable in my on my couch at home with a heated blanket, watching the snow come down, watching the hockey game. I'm like, oh, he's still in Montreal.
Yeah, and that was the worst thing, man. Like, you guys leaving in the car that day. Like, we had the flight booked, sure, like ahead of time, but if they just canceled our flight entirely the night before and we knew we weren't going to get out that day, we would have just driven home with you guys or rented a car earlier or done something. It was the fact that they made us wait until the last second before canceling our flight every single time. So we were booked for 3 separate flights. We went through security 3 times for the same flight. So like, we went at 9:30 that Sunday morning, then we left and went to the Eaton Center, came back, went through security again, and then like, it got canceled. So we went to the hotel and then came back in the morning on the Monday and went through security for a 3rd time for the same flight. It was the same flight, dude.
In hindsight, looking at that snowstorm coming up, I saw it Tuesday. I was looking at this snowstorm thinking, this is going to be a nightmare. We probably all should have took trains. That was probably the smart thing to do way ahead of time. I thought it was funny that the day before you guys were like, flying to Montreal is amazing. You don't even hit cruising altitude. It's just up and down, and it's a domestic flying's nothing with security. You're just talking about how great it is, and I'm like looking at the snow come down outside. I'm like,
this is bad.
Yeah,
because that was the first time I'd flown from Toronto to Montreal. Usually I drive, right, because you can stop in Brockville on the way, and it's like not that big of a deal. But and so I was like, oh, this is, like, we're descending and we've been on the plane for like 40 minutes. Like, it's amazing, But then, obviously bad things happen when there's a ton of snow. And like, again, like, full disclosure, it was really bad in the morning. Like, you looked outside the window and I was sending you guys snaps and stuff when we were at the airport, and like, you couldn't see like 10 feet in front of you because of the snow. So like, in all honesty, I didn't want to be taking off in that. And by the way, another thing,
I get why everything was canceled. Just Porter handled this poorly.
Exactly.
That's the
super poorly. And then another thing too is when we boarded our original flight at 11:45 a.m. on the Sunday, they told us, they're like, use the bathroom now because you will not be able to get up on this flight. It is going to be so turbulent. Like, you won't be able to stand up or like anything. And so we're like, oh, like, is this like, should we be taking off? Like, this seems like there's a reason why every other flight was canceled. But anyway, I feel like that's probably enough travel talk, but I feel like so many people, like, we're already 25 minutes into this episode, but I feel like so many people went through the same thing because they went to the Four Nations game that weekend and then tried to make it to Boston after that. Like, especially like a lot of the players were fine. Like they left the night of and like before the storm got super, super bad. And they also have like their private planes and stuff. So like, I'm sure they figured it out pretty quick, but a lot of friends and family of players and a lot of media members were just stuck. And you heard the stories like, from so many people, everyone was just stuck. So I feel like, I just had to share that to let people know that we experienced the same stupid scenario. And I was just so thankful to get back to Toronto, man. Like I couldn't believe it. What a terrible time. The travel, that is. But the actual game, which we should talk about now, was fantastic. Yeah. We went to Sweden, Finland in the afternoon, and then Canada, USA at a bar that night. Case, tell me about your experience at Sweden, Finland, and just in general.
Sweden, Finland, it was chaos around the Bell Center in Montreal, and we just told the Uber, like, drop us off as close as you can. And as soon as we said that, he had this look in his eye, like, yeah, I'm going to drop you off in 2 minutes then.
Yeah. Here? Like
yeah, I'll take the full fare. Thanks. Yeah. Does this look good? Sure. We jump out and start walking, immediately brush past Pierre LeBrun. I'm like, oh, hey. Neat. Walk around the corner to the Bell Center, and I just go, is that Carey Price? Oh, yeah. And Carey Price is just signing autographs out front, and Adam was like second in line to get his jersey, his Caulfield jersey signed, and then Price sits down and they have to do their interview he was doing out there. So didn't work out, but I've never been to the Bell Center before, and it was amazing. So easy getting in and out of that place for one, but then inside is just beautiful. And our seats were phenomenal. We were down in section 115, 15 rows up, I think. And although we were 15 rows up, it felt like I could lean over and spit on the ice. That rink is so steep with how the seats go up, and you felt like you're over the glass and in the play. The glass is so low that every TV timeout on the Jumbotron, it's like, please keep an eye out for pucks.
It's old school, man. I love it.
I know. So that was great. The atmosphere in there was really good. Like considering it was a Sweden-Finland game, everyone was cheering and involved, and there was a Swedish section that was loud, especially during the anthem, and same as the Finland section. And I remember PK Subban came on the Jumbotron and the building erupted. He's trying to get them to cheer for Mark Messier, and everyone's just wanting PK Subban on the screen. But that game, it's pretty much everything you could have asked for in a Sweden-Finland game in Canada. It was back and forth action, tight all the way, close checking, and then overtime with a beauty winner. That's about as good as it gets for us. It could have been a little bit better if Ricard Raquel shot the puck one more time. Parlay probably would have hit. So that hurt. Other than that, fantastic time at that game.
Incredible.
Afterwards, just bouncing back to the Uber to get a couple cheap pints in before we went to a bar. Got amazing luck. We were told 1,000,000 times to go to McLean's in Montreal, and we walked up there with 6 of us, and I'm going, no chance we're getting a seat here. We walk in, you get a table for 6? Yeah, they're leaving right now. Oh,
it's awesome.
Can we see a TV? Yeah, there's 2 right in front of you. All right, perfect. Walk in there, get absolutely dominated by the waitress in there. She just told us what we were eating and what we were drinking and didn't let us have a say in anything. It was the weirdest thing ever. But dude, so weird. When that national anthem kicked off in there and the whole building was singing, and then there was the fights and an early McDavid goal, that was just, I looked back at my text messages to my girlfriend, and it was just like, this place is blowing up, the roof is gone. Like, it was just unbelievable in there. So it was well worth sticking around. I don't know if it's worth it since you got home on Monday, but it was well worth sticking around to go to a bar in Montreal for that game.
No, totally well worth it, dude. Like that, being there at that bar in Montreal to see that game, that was probably the most electric 10 minutes of my entire life when it comes to hockey, because like watching hockey is incredible, right? But when you're surrounded by people who are also equally as invested as you are, it brings it to another level. So we're in there, American anthem comes on, boo, like everyone just booing it. It's the craziest thing. Like 5 years ago, you'd never dream of booing an anthem. It's just like, that's not what you do. But now it's like this whole tariff thing, the whole political situation. It's like, boo, like we all just committed. It was amazing. And then puck drop, you've got 3 back-to-back-to-back fights in the first 9 seconds. Like when the first one happened, we were like, oh, here we go. And then the second one happens and we're like, there's no way. And then we think it's done, right? And because there's like 2 seconds that have been played, and then they finally drop the puck and play the real hockey game, and USA dumps it in on Canada's net. Benner squeezes it, and then JT Miller throws his gloves off, and it's, oh my God, there's a third.
Favorite part of that, and I am now a Colton Parayko fan, is the look on his face. He's got another guy. I don't know who he had. He had someone grabbed, and he looks over, and JT Miller drops his gloves, and he has this look on his face of, you? And he just like smiles, drops his gloves, and skates at him. It was so great.
Dude, literally had a smile on his face.
The table beside us had, there's a bunch of people there. I think all of them but one was cheering for Canada, and the guy looks at me, points at my Devils hoodie, and says, "Hey, New Jersey." And I'm like, "Yeah, Devils fan." He's like, "Hi, me too." And then we kind of bonded off that. Game starts. Like a few minutes later, when US scores their first goal, he turns around to like high five and celebrate with me, and I just go, "Fuck you!" Absolutely traitored on him, like immediately threw him under the bus. I talked to him later, and he's like, "Oh, I thought you were from New Jersey because I am." I'm like, "No, I'm from Canada." But I apologize for cussing in his face right away. But it's so funny. He turns around to celebrate with me, and I'm like, "No." It might have been. I think it was the same guy. We're chanting. I don't know at what point in the game this was, but everyone in the bar is chanting "F you Matthews" for Austin Matthews. "F you Matthews." Like we're in enemy territory here, behind enemy lines in Montreal. I'm wearing a Maple Leafs OVO shirt in the bar. I'm a Maple Leafs fan through and through, diehard. Everyone knows this. I'm chanting it. I'm chanting "F you Matthews" because just there's something about that sweater, dude, that Canadian sweater when our players wear it. It doesn't matter who they play for on their club team. It's just you throw that on and everything else goes out the window. Like I was actively cheering for Sam Bennett, who I hate, Britton Hagel, who I hate. Everyone's favorite, Brad Marchand right now.
Oh, Marchand and like Sorelli, who is a low key guy to hate. Like not many people think of him as like, oh, he's a guy on Tampa who I hate. But no, you play a series or two against him, you'll hate him. So it's like actively cheering for those players and then actively cheering against Austin Matthews is just the strangest thing on the planet, but it was incredible.
The video is cutting from Marchand saying he's going to kill Marner on the ice to him in the stall beside him going, "Attaboy, Mitchie."
Yeah.
The contrast there is so great. And I think there's a lot of Marchand fans out there right now who hated him a week or two ago. So it's 100%, interesting.
100%. And you know what? When I ran into the two fake coaches, right? Austin Alexander and oh boy, forget his name, the second guy, but he works for Sportsnet. Tom Stewart is his name. When I ran into those guys, I was like, oh, so how, like, what an incredible interview with Marchand. And they were just like, yeah, man, like we're Leaf fans and he's the best. Like they were just head over heels in love for this guy because he's just like, you watch that interview and you're like, man, he's so likable when he's on your team. Like, and when he's not, you hate him, but that means he's doing his job perfectly. So yeah, that was incredible. Let's skip ahead a bit and talk about the final game. What an incredible game, dude. Like Canada, USA, two superpowers, haven't played best on best since 2014. Obviously, Canada wins in an overtime. Marner to McDavid in the slot. Past Matthews' stick. Didn't see him there. Jack Hughes also on the ice. We don't care as Leaf fans or Devils fans. We were ecstatic when the goal goes in. What are your thoughts about the final game, Case? Just top level here.
First of all, the commissioners and heads of the NHL have to be just grinning ear to ear as the best player in the world scores in overtime if the two greatest hockey countries in the world in this sold out barn in Boston. It was just like perfect storm for them. But the game, I had so many mixed emotions this whole time. The first period, I'm thinking, man, USA is all over Canada. And then they show the stats, and it's like Canada leads in shot chances, cycle chances, rush chances, ozone time. And the only thing that US was leading in was hits. They're double the hits. I'm like, yeah, I guess when you have the puck is when you're getting hit. And I started kind of thinking, I'm like, yeah, you know what? They are controlling the puck a lot more. And I started feeling good about it. But boy, was I ragging on Jordan Binnington and how sporadic he was, chaos in his crease and all over the place. Didn't give me a lot of confidence. And I owe him an apology. I will look directly into the camera and say, Jordan Binnington, I am sorry. You are the man. Because in overtime, holy, when did you become friggin' prime broder playing the puck and then also making these ridiculous saves across the crease to Kachuk, across the crease to Matthews, big glove save, absolutely phenomenal. And then you could just feel the goal was coming in when Matthew he was on the ice.
It did feel like he was going to score.
Yeah, Marner and McDavid were on the ice, and you could just feel a goal coming, and we all exploded out of our seats when we saw the puck go in the net. I have a quote here, a comment that I wanted to bring up. For all the Americans, a kilometer is the distance from the nearest U.S. defender from McDavid.
That's good.
That's killed me when I saw it on Instagram. But man, was that game exciting, nerve-wracking because USA has got a great team, obviously, and they're right there. So, relief, just pure relief.
Relief is a great word for it because this tournament, even though it's you can say it's a made-up tournament all you want. Got news for you: they're all made up. Even the 72 Summit Series, which might go down as the best series ever, made up. Like, they're all made up. So this is equally made up. But going into this tournament, the stakes on Team Canada were so high. If they don't win this if they lose to the US twice, in round robin and in the finals, we're talking about a shift in terms of hockey supremacy. And I know that might sound like I'm overstating it a bit, but that was what was on the line for Canadians here, because this is supposed to be our game. You think back to 2014, for example, at the Olympics, the last time we played true best on best. And Canada just kind of dominated that tournament. It just wasn't very close. So you have to think back to 2010 when the States really gave Canada a run for their money and it came down to overtime and Sid scored the golden goal and the rest is history. But it just felt in 2014, even in 2016, the World Cup of Hockey, Canada just kind of ran away with games and tournaments and they were head and shoulders the best team when it came to best on best. But going into this tournament, you looked on paper and you looked at odds makers and it's the USA were the favorites to win, which is crazy on some books at some points in the tournament. And then they beat you in round robin. So a lot was on the line here. A lot. So relief is the best word to describe it.
Outside of ownership of the game and, all the commercials we're playing our game and all of that there's this political pressure that is kicked up with tariffs and the 51st state and all that stuff going on. And it's just you have to be feeling that pressure as well, even though you shouldn't. There shouldn't be, you don't mix politics and sports, but it happened. And so I feel like there's even more pressure. So that's why I said relief. There's just so much relief and you think, good, I don't have to delete every form of media for the next year so I can avoid all these comments. But then here's where it came to. Here's what I've wrote down a couple common occurring comments I've been seeing. The first one is, congrats on winning the All-Star game. Second one is congrats on winning an exhibition tournament. Pretty sure the record is 1-1. That frustrated me so much because if USA won, those same people would have been just blowing up, calling us the 51st state, saying USA owns hockey, owns Canada, all this stuff, but then they quickly revert to making it meaningless. Here's a next quote I have. This was the biggest game I have ever played in. Matthew Tkachuk, who played in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final and won last year.
Yeah.
So don't tell us that this is an all-star game or an exhibition tournament when the players cared that much.
Yeah. Fans are dumb, right? like we can all agree on that. Some fans are just dumb. But go back like 2 weeks, and I obviously said it tongue in cheek, but it's like you could see this coming. And I said, if we don't win this, it didn't mean anything. But if we do win, it's the biggest win in the world. So you could see this coming for sure. Like there was going to be a segment of fans who would have gone either way depending on the outcome. So it's not crazy that this reaction is happening right now, but it just feels so nice, man. Relief is the word I just keep coming back to because a lot on the line. They made it political. Like you said, you shouldn't mix sports and politics because let's be honest, a lot of these players don't necessarily have the education to speak on real political issues, right? So like I always find it fascinating when reporters or smarter people in the room ask athletes to comment on politics. And it's like they don't get paid to do that kind of stuff. Like they're literally professional athletes who use their body, not their brain. Okay. I'm not saying they're all dumb, but I'm just saying like that's not their profession, right? Like that's not what they're paid to do. So like, can we not ask them stuff about politics?
Half the Canadians live in the US and half of the US players live in Canada.
That's right. So there's another wrinkle to this whole thing, but they made it political. The US made it political by their president calling them on the day of the game to wish them good luck. Multiple players on the American team said, we're doing this for our president, for our country, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's just, you can't
Something
say,
about invading Ottawa if they start a fight.
Yeah, like you can't say out of one side of your mouth that, this is not political, which is what they did after the fact, by the way. Billy Guerin and company saying, this is not a political thing, but then also have the president call your team on the day of and say, good luck, because those two things, like, they can't coexist. This was certainly political for them as well. And so that's something to remember as we talk about this tournament going forward. So just such a huge win, such a relief. I had a few comments about the game itself. I'm such a sicko case. I took notes during the game. Okay. One of the first notes that I made, it was in the first period. You probably remember the play. Seth Jarvis. Okay. A lot of criticism for him making this team over certain players. Mark Scheifele was one. Tom Wilson was another. Had a fine tournament. He's a pretty good player, Seth Jarvis. Had that whole, funny story about his friends coming from Winnipeg, all driving up together and 30-hour drive, whatever. But I'm such a sicko, man. This is the note I made. After that Seth Jarvis play, where he's in the crease, banging around, trying to get the puck over Hellebuck. He's trying to kind of toe drag it around Hellebuck. I noted in my notes, Zach Hyman and John Tavares bury that every single day of the week, man. God. Every day of the week. That's the only thing I was thinking of. So in my head, I'm like, if they lose by a goal and Seth Jarvis didn't bury that one and John Tavares didn't even make the snub list, like, I'm going to go crazy. Like I'm going to go insane. So that was one comment I made. Just
first of all, John Tavares would have been 3 zones back because he hadn't caught up to the play yet. But okay,
yeah, like Mark Stone.
He was asleep before overtime.
What? Okay, bad call. Why would he say that? Why would John say that? That's dumb. But I don't know. I saw that and was like, yeah, no, JT would have buried
in terms
that.
Of crease presence. Yeah, JT's probably bearing that. That's his bread and butter. So I see what you're saying.
And by the way, like I said weeks ago or when the team was released, didn't think he should have made it. I thought he should have made the snub list, but not the actual team. Yeah. But a guy like Hyman, a guy like Scheifele, I don't know. So anyway, I'm glad that didn't end up being a factor in the game because that would have crushed me. But let me just go through the other comments I made during the game, or notes I made rather. I loved the Hagel, Cirelli, Marner line that game. They were dogs on bones, especially Hagel and Cirelli, because it was those two in the corner on the half wall, like working, like absolute mercenaries in there, just demolishing anything in their way. And then you'd see Marner, and he was like a piston. He was just kind of floating in and out, gravitating towards the puck. Oh, it's still in there. Let me just float. Let me get open, and creating from that. So those two guys would go in, get the puck out to Marner, and then they would create. I thought Marner had a fantastic game, and that's why he moved up.
We could owe him an apology as well. But I also would say that John Cooper handled Mitch Marner amazingly.
Oh my
God. The first game, having him up with McDavid, it didn't really click at first. And then they put him out for OT because that's what he does, and he scored. And then knocking him down in the lineup, putting him with two guys who you said are dogs, which is exactly what he needs. Get two guys, go get me the puck, and then I can make magic. And then late in the game, in the championship game, we need to spark some offense. Marner with McDavid, go. Well, they went out and scored. So
yeah,
maybe I owe Marner an apology, but
I think a lot of people do. The thing is with Marner, like, he wasn't good in the game. After the first game, he wasn't good playing on that top line. So he gets moved down. I said from the very start, like, I'm a Marner fan, I'm a Leaf fan, but I said from the very start on our show, saying, I don't think it works with him and McDavid. McDavid is just all gas, no brakes, and Marner is like a guy who slows down the play and whatever, but it just wasn't working after game one. So I'm glad they split it up and moved him down, because it gave him something to work for. Like a Mitch Marner, you can't just hand it to him, like, you've got to make him work for it, build that resiliency. Like, not saying that he hasn't been resilient throughout his career, but I think he's struggled with, complacency at times. And if you get told that you're getting, you're going to be on the top line right from the jump, and you're going to play with Connor McDavid, and like, that could be, of course, that's a huge honor, but also you could get a little complacent there if you just think that you're one of the best guys, ever. So I was happy that he had to work his way back up to that top line, and it worked. Like, that was what was so special about it. When they reconnected those two, I don't know if you remember this play. There was a backdoor pass from Marner to McDavid, and it was JT Miller who broke up the play. It was going to be a tap in. And right when I saw that play, I believe it was in the third. It was in the third when they were tied. Right when I saw that play, swear to God, went straight to my phone and thought about who I'm going to pick for the OT winner if there is OT, and put my money on Connor McDavid, because I had a feeling like Connor, if he gets more opportunities like that, he's going to bury. He's not going to let a stick like JT Miller get in the way. And those two were buzzing together all night.
And it completed the storybook, handing off of the torch, Crosby to McDavid in that game. So, of course, that was an easy bet. Why did you not bet more?
Oh, I know. Like, that's my biggest regret. I put $2.50 on it. And I put $2.50 on Canada winning when they were down 2-1, or was it 3-2? 2-1, I guess. Yeah,
2-1.
And yeah, obviously.
Game was 3-2.
Yeah, and so I won like $25 or something. But it's like, just obvious. Like, in hindsight, should have put more on it. But it is what it is. I just felt McDavid, once they reconnected those two, like, they were just magic. And and like the passing of the torch thing, someone asked McDavid about that, and he said something to the effect of like, oh, Sid's still here, like, he's not going anywhere. So maybe we'll have to see it at the Olympics to have like a true full circle moment. But just like, who else but McDavid would score that goal, man? Like, it was just incredible. Like, what an electric goal that was. Like, just unbelievable. Couple more notes, like, and maybe, I don't know, do you have much more on this game itself?
No.
Or okay, we can open it up to the entire tournament and wrap up here. A couple notes I made. Another one was for me, watching this whole tournament, there was a huge difference between the guys who had been there, and by been there, I mean like have gone on deep playoff runs or have won a cup, and the guys who have not. So, I look at some of the Leafs players who struggled until the final, right? And, Matthews, Marner, even Nylander, compared to guys who have just been there, like Kachuk and Eichel, and even Slavin has been on deep runs, and he was incredible. And it's like, there's just, for me, such a clear difference out there between guys who have done it and guys who haven't. And that was just obvious for me.
Well, that was what we talked about on the last episode. And what I pointed out, talking, the difference between Canada and USA is how many cups were on Canada's roster, and, how many guys have won at the top level, and comparing that to the US. And I think that showed in the championship game, where I feel like there was a little bit more urgency late in the game, and it kind of caught up to the US. But I mean, they had me nervous all tournament, and they had me nervous that whole game. So
yeah. And like, I guess I did have a couple more things on that final game. Like, you mentioned Binnington in overtime, the 2 saves on Matthews. Like, I just got to point out, like, I thought Matthews, if he wasn't the best American player, he was at least top 3. And I thought the same for Marner, which for me is just so crazy to say, because, those are 2 guys who haven't done it. But to be able to elevate their game and be the most impactful players, or some of the most impactful players on their teams, I thought it was incredible.
But do you think that not deflecting that pass is going to haunt Austin Matthews?
Sure, Kevin. that was so good. That was so good.
Sure, Kevin.
Yeah,
that's great.
Man, Austin Matthews is the best with the Toronto media. Like, some guys, like Mitch, for example, kind of crumbles and like gets defensive and has like a me versus the media, or me versus the world mentality. Willie is a guy who never lets it impact him at all. Like, you never know, like, if he's even listening to your question. John Tavares is a guy who like just gives you a cookie cutter answer no matter what. He'll never say anything unexpected. Austin just always gives some sort of snarky comment or reply, but it's not like ever disrespectful. It's just kind of like, hey, like, I'm the boss here. Like, ask me real questions, So it's similar to like a Jack Hughes at times, where they just kind of know how to deal with stuff like that. So just that's an aside, but that's another thing that was just, funny to see after the fact, because those 2 flew back to Toronto together, Marner and Matthews, that is. One's a champion. One is 0-7 in winner takes all games, and has lost a few of them at TD Garden now. So
reminds me of that. I saw the meme where the guys are driving in the big box truck, singing "Dancing in the Moonlight," 3 of them, and then there's one guy just straight face, and that was Jake Gensel with all the Tampa guys going back home.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny.
Yeah. But I gotta say, like, I really truly thought, this isn't the homer in me coming out. Maybe it is a little bit. You can tell me if it is, but I truly thought that Matthews and Marner were both 2 of the most impactful players in that game, which was so encouraging for me to see.
In that game, yeah.
In that game,
sure.
in that game.
100%.
Because prior to that, kind of useless.
Yeah.
Like, Matthews missed the one game with some sort of ailment, and before that, like, he didn't score a goal in the tournament. Like, he had 2 primary assists in that final game, and in overtime, I can't believe he didn't score on Binnington, who was just incredible. And you kind of touched on it too. Like, speaking of Binnington, another thing I noticed about him was that, like, I didn't know he was such a good puck handler. Like, he just, like, every rim, like, he's stopping it and like making a nice clean breakout pass. Like, I wasn't familiar with his game, so
that's why I called him prime brodeurs, mostly because of the puck play. It was just ridiculous, and also because of the bit of chaos on some of those nice saves. But it was scary at times, but he was good at playing the puck, that's for sure.
Dude, what an absolute gamer. So this is what I was saving before the show.
Do I look nervous?
just because
Do I look nervous?
Just because, man, like, we've been through this before. The guy was in the East Coast League and then wins a Stanley Cup, right? And then after that, it's like, is he still good? He's had up and down years, but he hasn't been back to this like kind of pressure cooker game since then. And even throughout this tournament, like when the first goal against Sweden goes in and it's just right over his shoulder, like middle of the net, I remember texting the group and being like, all right, that's enough, Binnington. Like that's one goal. No, that's enough. I've seen enough. But then he rises to the occasion. Dude, like it gives me chills as a guy who, like, I don't want to say, wasn't the hardest worker on the ice, but I wasn't the biggest fan of practices growing up, but I always considered myself a gamer. So to see a true gamer, which I feel like is a total dying breed, is just incredible to me. Like just a guy who can elevate in the biggest moments and just get it done. Like unbelievable. Gave me chills. Really did.
Yeah.
Wanted to ask you, I mean, Binnington is one. I think a lot of people's opinions have changed throughout this tournament, but was there anyone else like any other player who your opinion kind of changed of after this tournament? Like whether it was a guy who like you didn't really think about before or a guy who had a lot of hype surrounding them who didn't have a good tournament or like whatever, like any opinions change for you?
I think I will point out that Brady Tkachuk's value has absolutely skyrocketed. I always thought that he's like, I don't know if he was a guy who could be a top player or that caliber. Like obviously he's a top player in Ottawa, but I didn't know what that meant until I watched this tournament, and he is an absolute, talk about gamers. Like he just elevated his game and was phenomenal, chipping in goals obviously, and then just laying the body. It started making me think all you got to do is get to the playoffs if you're Ottawa, and you've got this animal leading your team that could give a spark and a hope to maybe win you win a series, and kind of changes the future of this team a little bit, where maybe people start thinking that they can be back and maybe players go there. I did see that he's most likely at the door, but
someone reported that instantly. It's like, oh, he loves playing in big games. Well, get him out of Ottawa.
That was my player that I really had to take away from that tournament. Was Brady Tkachuk. I mean, I guess I just didn't. I knew he hit and I knew he fought, but I didn't really respect his game as much as I should have maybe. And now I look at it and I'm like, you get him on any playoff team, he's maybe more impactful in the playoffs than Matthew Tkachuk was.
Yeah, he's an absolute mutant, man. Like, and he looks like one too. He looks like the guy from the Goonies who's locked in the basement, man. That's what he looks like. But he's a gamer. Him and Matthews on that top line together in that final game, just an unfair combo. So if Matthews wasn't the best player, it was definitely him, or like I thought Gensel had a really good game too in that final game. He was, that's a guy for me who just like, when the stakes get high, Jake Gensel just performs, man. Like I know we talked about it when he got traded to Carolina last year, and we were like, yeah, look at his playoff performance. Like it's as good, if not better, than his regular season performance. So he's another gamer. Just love to see him play. Thought he had a great game against Canada. But I kind of knew that about Gensel. I didn't really know that about Brady. And I got to tell you, as a Leaf fan, and the Battle of Ontario is fully back on. Like I ragged on the team to start the year. I said, I wasn't sure if I was going to write them off or if I was going to say I told you so yet, but they've kind of proven me wrong. They're having a pretty good stretch here, and it looks like they're going to be buyers at the deadline, and Boston has dropped off. So that kind of carves a path for them. But I got to tell you, I don't want to play Brady Tkachuk in the first round if I'm the Maple Leafs, because he will be relentless. He will exhaust that team. And we've seen he can do much more than just play physical too. So
I called it chaos and compete were the Tkachuk brothers. And that was my big point out of them, and just a blurb in the US here. But one quote I want to read this to you because they put this on the screen during the game.
Okay.
I just went, what are we doing here? It was first time two brothers scored 2 goals each in one game in an NHL sanctioned international tournament.
What?
Yeah, man. Good job. Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess
They put
so.
that on the screen after in the Finland game, and I just shook my head reading that. Like, wow, they're pretty bored in the truck, eh?
Yeah, seriously, who came up with that one? Like
Nah.
they didn't even have to fact check that one, eh? They
Yeah.
just like that's too specific. That's obviously never happened before. Yeah, man, like Brady, we knew Matthew could elevate, but Brady elevating is incredible. A guy for me, like coming out of the Sweden Finland game, was Mikael Granlund. Like I picked him as a guy I was going to be watching going into the tournament because like he's kind of played like third line minutes his entire career, and then he goes to San Jose and he's like a minute muncher and a point guy, and it's like, well, is that just because he plays in San Jose and there's like not really much around him, or is he actually good and did he improve? And my conclusion was that, yeah, I think he has improved immensely as a player. And watching him in that Finland game against Sweden, he scores the winner to upset the Swedes. And it's like, he looked great all night. So that's a guy whose stock is up for me for sure.
Water bug, just all over the ice and really, really entertaining to watch. And I heard they're talking about some of the players just mentioning him as crucial to Finnish hockey over the last decade in that he has played in every world championship. He had 7 points in the Olympic Games in 2013, 2014. He was 12 points in 10 games for Finland in the World Championship after that, 9 points in 8 games and captained the team in 2017-18. He played in 2021, 2022, where he had 11 points in 9 games. He's just always been there for this club. And it was interesting to see that he was going to start on the fourth line, and immediately you just see him creep up in the lineup, and he's just one of their most impactful hockey players. So hearing some of the praise from some of the Finnish players and watching him play, I put some respect on his name after that.
Yeah, and you said that to me too when we're at the game. You're like, how about Granlund starting on the fourth line wearing an A? Like, just interesting dynamic there. But so he was the guy who stood out for me. Last thing, because I think we've been going for over an hour here. We should probably wrap up.
I've just got a blurb about each team, and then I'm good.
Okay. Last thing I wanted to ask you is, kind of on the same thought, but who's a guy who just totally didn't do it for you in this tournament? Just didn't look good. Like, thought he was going to have a good tournament, but just didn't do it.
Most of the Swedish team, but in particular Pettersson, who I've always been banging the drum for a long time. But
also, what the I just accidentally played something there. But yeah, Pettersson, dude, like, that's the obvious answer. That's who I was going to say as well. Did he have a point in the tournament? Like, he was just,
I don't know,
like, at the game that we were at and watching him live, like, he just didn't. There were 2 players on Team Sweden who were just electric at all times. One was Jesper Bratt, and the other was William Nylander. Like, those were the 2 guys who were generating, and like, there were a few others, of course, but those were 2 guys who caught my eye at all times. Like Erik Karlsson was good, Adrian Kempe was good.
Yeah.
But then Pettersson just, nothing.
Pettersson maybe was an easy answer. Here's a hard one. Was Kyle Connor hurt? What happened there? Because he seemed a bit invisible in the 3 games he played in, and he did not play in the championship game. Maybe started on the first line, and maybe a guy you think of as a top 3 forward on the US. So that might be one to point out.
Yeah, having an incredible year too. I think there were rumblings that he was kind of banged up. I'm not exactly sure, or maybe they just wanted to get heavier. I don't know, because that means that Kreider draws in for him, right? So I don't know. That's a guy I didn't think of, but yeah, I mean, it was a big deal that he was scratched. I feel like they maybe could have used some extra scoring with him in the lineup, considering the year he's having. But yeah, that's a good one. Other than that, like, I thought Rantanen was a little quiet as well, but he doesn't have as much to work with. We thought Montempalo was good on the back end. Like that was a guy who, by all accounts, was not expected to be there and was pretty good in the circumstances. So, yeah, goaltending. It was not a goaltender's tournament until it quickly was in the final game when it felt like a goaltending duel. But yeah, the goalies I didn't think were that good at all going until the very final game, except for Hellebuck, who was incredible and wasn't playoff Hellebuck. Like I kind of joked he might look like, he looked like regular season Hellebuck who wins Vezina trophies and is the best guy in the league.
When you look at the World Juniors and you look at goalies, the ones that stand out are the ones that got absolutely shelled and kept the puck out of the net. The guys on Germany and Latvia and Switzerland that received 54 shots and let 2 goals in or 3 goals in, whatever it is. Though that's usually the only goalies that really stand out until the championship games, and then someone comes to mind. You're not going to see that in this tournament. These are all the best. So it's, I'm not surprised that we're talking about a goalie other than the championship game.
Yeah. Okay. Give me your final rapid fire thoughts on each team and we'll wrap this up.
Finland they said the most returning players from the 2016 World Cup in this tournament. And I think that showed in the later stages and it showed in the Canada game where they almost came back and in the Sweden game that we went to where they won. Yeah. I thought there was like a lot of experience and a lot of clicking on that team. They didn't have, I made notes in the first game I watched when they were in it all the way until the third period with the US. It's like they didn't have the talent maybe the US had, but they were snapping passes around. The puck movement was phenomenal. So, I mean, a lot of returning players from 2016, they still don't seem like an old team by any stretch. So I think they were much better than what we expected. And the under-experienced defensemen were their best defensemen. Yeah. Montempalo stood out to me. You mentioned it, but he was great. And I was impressed by that. And I think that they could look good at the Olympics next year.
Healthy just too.
You get a couple more guys back in the lineup. You get a Heiskanen in there.
Yeah.
This team starts turning around pretty quick, and I think they could be good. Sweden, the Stars did not show up for this team until the game against the US, and I think that hurt them. They had like maybe one guy show up in this game, one guy show up in that game. But it showed how deep they can be because they were still competitive all the way through. And that was because, different guys stepped up at different times. If everyone shows up on this team in a game, they're as good as anyone. Mm-hmm. That's what I gathered from that.
So totally agree.
That's my Sweden comment. USA, I've already talked about them a lot. I talked about how nervous they made me. I talked about how, they didn't have the guys who have won it in the end. They had the Kachuk brothers who were chaos and compete. I think Eichel talked himself back into the conversations of like top 10 player, top 10 forward in the league, top 15, like top 10 maybe. Like he looked really good. Rensky's dominant season was just solidified in that tournament. I think he looked probably the best defenseman in the tournament, other than I would say he was maybe
he led the whole tournament in points, dude, as a defenseman.
Yeah, he led the whole tournament in points.
Yeah,
I think he tied with McDavid.
Yeah.
So that was good. A lot of takeaways from that team. So they'll be back and will make me nervous again next year. The Canadian team, I feel like we kind of touched on this a bit, but everyone played their role wonderfully. And in a tournament where if they lost, fans would have ragged on the team selection and Hockey Canada, the GM's jobs would have been called for, and now they look like geniuses. Bennett, Hagel, dogs, absolute dogs. Everyone loves Bennett right now, and you're just reminded of what he brings to the game. Harvey, poised. I was a bit shocked.
Yeah, Harley,
not Harvey.
Yeah.
Harley, when they added him back in, I was a bit shocked that was going to be the guy, and then he looked like he belonged immediately.
So good.
So respect there. I'll respect him a little more by saying Harley, not Harvey next time. Doughty was solid, more so than I thought a guy who's played 10 games could be. And then McKinnon, Crosby, McDavid drove the offense. It's just like everyone played their role to a T, and it worked. So now they're not going to get shit on. That's kind of my...
And to finish off that point, everyone playing their roles and team selection and whatnot for Team Canada, like now the biggest problem going into next tournament, like the Olympics, is who is going to be Jordan Binnington's backup, because he's the starter until further notice. Like until he gives them a reason not to make him the starter, he's the starter, because we've seen it now, even though he has like whatever it is, like an 895 save in the NHL right now, even though like he hasn't been himself, like he comes through in big games. We've seen it now several times. He's a gamer. Who will be his backups at the Olympics next year? Probably Logan Thompson. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that, because it sounds
it's all going to come down to what they do next year. Logan Thompson's having a great year this year, and apparently they don't like him, so I don't...
Yeah, there's more politics going on there, so maybe not Logan Thompson, but who knows? Like maybe it's Hill, maybe it's Montembeault, maybe it's, Darcy Kemper, Cam Talbot, whoever, but it will be a race and a battle for the backup position to start the tournament at the Olympics, because Jordan Binnington has won that honor. He's won that right now. And like going forward, I mean, what happened in 2010 case? Like Brodeur started the tournament, Prime Luongo came in and won in the final game. So it's like Canada has a history of having great goalies who you need to use multiple of them, and like that's okay. So Binnington's going to start at the Olympics, and we'll see who the backups are. But okay, anything else we need to get out, Case, or is that about it on our experience at Four Nations?
That's it.
Okay, thanks so much, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Boys in the Booth podcast. We'll be back next week with our third, Mr. Harper Cody. So we'll talk to you then. Cheers.